Mr. President, there's a lot to be proud about from my view of being a Kansan. We have lots of challenges in our state, and we're undergoing serious ones at the moment. For those of you who've noticed on the news, although it's not particularly a story here in the nation's capital, but Kansas is ablaze. Fires are devastating acres and acres. In fact, more than 600, nearly 700,000 acres in our state, grassland, have been burned. Fires have started. We've had winds for the last 3 days, 50 to 60 miles an hour, and we've had dozens of communities and counties that have been evacuated. Lots of places that have been hard hit. My home county of Rooks has experienced those fires. Hutchinson, a community of 50,000 people, had to evacuate 10,000 people in what we would consider in our state a pretty big place. And so they've been rampant and they've been real, and they've had significant consequences to many, many lives in our state. As people do know, Kansas is an agricultural place. We raise lots of crops, but we're certainly a livestock state, and our ranchers are experiencing the significant challenges that come from loss of pasture, the death of their cattle, the burning of their fences. And I was, on my way over here, I was reading a couple of articles that appeared in Kansas press that I thought I wanted to bring to my colleagues' attention. There's nothing here that necessarily asks for any kind of government help, but it does highlight the kind of people I represent. There's a farm in Clark County. The county seat is Ashland. It's on the border with Oklahoma. 85% of the county's grassland, 85% of the acres in that county have been burned. This means the death of hundreds and thousands of cattle. Make sure I said that clearly. It means the death of hundreds, if not thousands, of cattle in that county. And that's the economic driver of the communities that are there. Ashland, the county seat, is a population of about 900 or 1,000. It's the biggest town in the county, and its future rests in large part upon what happens in agriculture. There's lots of great ranch families in our state. One of those is the Gardners. There's a Gardner Ranch in Clark County. Their story is told a bit in the Wichita Eagle in today's edition. They're known as some of the best ranchers in the country. For more than 50 years, they've provided the best Angus cattle. They have customers across the country, but it's a family ranch. This is a multi-generation, and 3 brothers now ranch together. It's not an unusual way that we do business in Kansas. And it's one of the things, in addition to the economic circumstances that agriculture presents in our state, one of the reasons I appreciate the opportunity to advocate on behalf of farmers and ranchers. It's one of the last few places in which sons and daughters work side by side with moms and dads, in which grandparents are involved in the operation. Our grandkids grow up knowing their grandparents. There's a way of life here that's important to the country, and our values, our integrity, our character is often transmitted from one generation to a next in this circumstance because we're still able to keep the family together, working generation to generation. The Gardners are an example of that, but there's hundreds and many more Kansans who would exemplify this. But I wanted to tell the story of Mr. Gardner as reported by the Wichita Eagle. Mr. Gardner said that he was slowly driving by some of his estimated cattle that had died in this massive wildfire, and he complained on their behalf they never had a chance. The fire was so fast. His ranch is, as I said, one of the most respected. The quality of the family's Angus cattle have been a source of pride and national attention for more than 50 years. Like others, the Gardners have endured plenty of bumps, and this is him telling their story, over 5 generations of ranching. The drought and dust of the 1930s was tough, he said, and even drier times in the 1950s. And about 5 years ago, the family lost, 5 years ago, we had another drought in our state that was so devastating. He says his family lost 2,000 acres when they couldn't make a payment to the bank. Blizzards in 1992 killed a lot of cattle. My point is that nothing is easy about this life, but there's something so special about it. The point I want to make is that people are responding to help. And I want to thank Kansans and others from across the country who are responding to the disasters that are occurring across our state throughout this week and into the future. This isn't expected to go away anytime soon. Mr. Gardner says that more hay is on the way. The process of rebuilding fences will begin, hopefully within a few weeks. He said he was sent word from a Mennonite relief teams are coming from 2 eastern states, and they're coming to work on his fences, and to do so without pay. Truckloads of hay are already en route. They're rolling in. This story indicates that many of those truckloads of hay are coming from ranchers who in the past have bought livestock from the Gardners. Mr. Gardner's veterinarian, Randall Spare, says the Gardners have been long known for their taking exceptional care of their customers. And he says, the veterinarian says, now it's time for the customers to repay them. The Gardners are the cream of the crop, like their cattle. And I'm not surprised so many people from so many places are wanting to help them. The reporter says that while he was talking to Mr. Gardner for this report, this interview, Gardner answered his cell phone as his pickup slowly rolled down the landscape that now looks so barren. The reporter said that many of the calls were from clients who just called to send their best, to be brought up to date, to ask the Gardners how could they help. How are the Gardners holding up? Mr. Gardner says it's really something special when you hear a pause on the other end of the line, and you know it's paused because the person who's called is crying, because they care that much. It's like that with ranching, Mr. Gardner says. We're all a family. It's a great thing about our state. It's like that with Kansas. We're all a family. But the fact that his family is still alive, he tells a story of not knowing whether his brother and his wife were alive. The fire swept around them, but they found a place that avoided the fire, that had a wheat field that the wheat was still green and so short that the fire didn't intrude. But he stopped his truck to think a bit, and the story indicates to sob a bit. He watched as his brother Mark and his wife Eva disappeared behind a wall of fire as they tried to save their horses and dogs at their home. Ultimately, the house was destroyed. Mr. Gardner, the one the reporter is talking to, says, I had no choice but to turn around and drive away. The fire was all around me. For a half hour, I didn't know whether my brother and his wife were dead or alive. He said that his brother and his wife and some firefighters gathered in the middle of that wheat field. It was so short and so green it wouldn't burn. He says it was so smoky I didn't even know exactly where they were. But when a firefighter came driving by and told us everybody made it out, that's when I knew Mark and his wife were alive. That's when I knew everything would eventually be all right. I'm telling you, he says, that's when you learn what's really important. And so today I come to the Senate floor to express my gratitude for the opportunity to represent Kansans like the Gardners, farmers and ranchers across our state, but city folks as well, who know the importance of family, who know that living or dying is an important aspect of life, but more importantly, how they live is more important. And to thank those people, not just from Kansas, but from across the country, who've rallied to the cause to make sure there's a future for these families and for their farming and ranching operations. It's a great country in which we care so much for each other, and it's exemplified in this time of disaster that occurs across my state. I'm grateful to see the example, and I would encourage my colleagues in Kansas that we behave the way that Kansas farmers and ranchers do. Live life for the things that are really meaningful, and make sure we take care of each other. Mr. President, I yield the floor.